you, sir.
Yeah, yeah. How are you doing, guys?
Doing
Whew.
great.
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. A lot of things to talk about today, though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Busy
It's
schedule.
actually yeah, Jose.
No, just saying that we have a full package schedule. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. So if you're joining right now, the main topic today, as you can read, is committee meeting. But we just made an announcement with some changes on what's going to happen with the Sage side of things, especially on the econ side. And we will also have Chris and Chip joining us today. So that's it's going to be an interesting brew. It's going to be an interesting brew. Brew number 110, and I haven't been able to join the previous three ones because we were traveling with Michael. That is something that I'm going to cover today as well. But yeah, are we ready to get started, guys? What do you think?
Yep. I think we can get started. People are coming, but yeah, we have some noteworthy news. Meanwhile,
Yeah. Yep.
The real host is back. Yep.
this is so offensive. I created this, bro.
That's crazy.
Did you guys do not worthy news while I was out?
We did noteworthy
Yeah.
news. Come on, Santi. We are
Okay.
not.
Just
We are
because,
not.
hey, just
We are
because
not.
you were gone
Yeah.
doesn't mean the structure changes,
Yeah.
man.
Just because you are the star, bro.
No way. No way
We are
you're
not.
saying
We are not pagans. We respect the rituals here.
that. Oh man. So yeah, not worthy news. I think that the biggest thing to cover is probably what we did with Michael. As everyone knows, we've been out with Michael traveling the world pretty much for the past 3 weeks. We went to Dubai. After Dubai, we went to Bangkok. And after Bangkok, we went to Istanbul, where a community meetup happened, and also in Thailand as well. And man, people are super excited about Star Atlas. That's one key takeaway that I had from the travels. First, like Michael participated in a bunch of panels everywhere we went to. He had a couple panels that he was participating in. And then we had a lot of side events and stuff like that we had to join to go talk to other projects and to just spread the holy Star Atlas gospel. Michael crushed it in every single panel, let me tell you that. And also some big ones like in Token 2049. He was there with the Animoca co-founder Jatsu and a couple big names as well. I think the CEO from Immutable. So it was all super exciting. And yeah, we had a community meetup in Thailand. We had people drive like 2 hours from different places of Thailand to Bangkok to just go to the community meetup. So that was amazing. And yeah, all super exciting. People, another key takeaway is that people are very excited about Star Atlas, but haven't been able to follow with all the updates that we have. Like when we had the booth and we were showing people the progress that we are making, people were like, "Oh my god, I didn't know that you guys were doing all this." So yeah, there's still a huge audience to recapture from the crypto Web3 gaming market for sure. That we have to work on recapturing. So yeah, that's one of the key takeaways as well. But people are really excited on what we're building and are mind blown as well that we have a working economy with Starbased. Also, a lot of people just saw what happened with search. Like that went actually very viral. And if they were aware about Star Atlas and what we were building, was mainly because of search and the impact that it had in people's minds. So yeah, I don't know if there are any questions about it or anything, but
What
yeah,
was
it
your
was
favorite part
super
of the trip?
exciting. Sorry,
What was your favorite part of the trip?
man, it's always the fact of meeting people in real life after chatting with them for a while. Like I met with community members that they just knew that we were in Dubai, for example, and they sent a DM and they were like, "Oh, let's meet. If you're here in Dubai, let's have a coffee." And you just go for a coffee, and it's weird, like you're talking with someone that you don't even know, but you have so much in common. Like we were speaking about the sage economy and just Star Atlas overall, and it's just very cool to experience.
Yeah, man, it's super crazy that we have people all over the world getting together to explore Star Atlas. And but at the same time, it feels as we are super early, right? There are so many people to reach out to, so many people
We
to
are
meet.
very early.
Yeah, it's
That's
crazy. It's actually
that's
crazy.
another thing. That's another
That's
thing.
actually crazy.
Yeah, yeah, and also the other thing is that we have a. It's so different the way that we're doing marketing, events, and all that. Like we're doing it in such an organic way, and yeah, just organic expansion and how we do marketing as well and community outreach. Like we don't spend money, and there are a lot of people actually spending a lot of projects actually spending big amounts of money, and we achieve pretty much the same level of awareness for the Stratos brand doing it in an organic way. So that's
It's crazy. Yeah,
that, that's not a minor thing. We're spending $0 in marketing right now, and people are very aware of Star Atlas out there. So
the best investment in Strata's marketing is getting Santi's beautiful face all over the world. I agree.
yeah, oh my god.
That's a good marketing push.
Oh man, there's no best marketing push I think that than the community, and also Michael Weiner just spreading the holy gospel in panels out there, man. People are always mind blown at the vision and the detail that we're working with. So yeah, I see
Yeah,
Maxime saying in the chat that I should come back to Paris. I definitely want to. I really want to go back to Paris and host another meetup in there. And actually, a meetup happened in Istanbul yesterday. There were about, I think, 40 people. They had some drinks with Miguel and Michael, and I saw a couple pictures on Twitter as well. That looked amazing, honestly.
shout out to our
Us.
Turkish community. You guys rock.
Big community,
Yeah,
and man, if you ever go to Istanbul, just try all the food you can. Oh my
Oh,
god,
really?
bro! Oh my god, the food in Istanbul is so good, so good. Shout out to the Turkish breakfast. Shout out to the man. That's I was mind blown at the Turkish breakfast. You get like a big table of food, and yeah, you can every single thing that you have on the table is actually super tasty. So shout out to the Turkish breakfast.
yeah. And Michael is speaking right at Crossroads.
He's speaking at Crossroads. That's another noteworthy new. He's speaking at Crossroads. I think that's happening this week. So yeah, he's speaking at that event, and we have some big announcements coming in there. They're also going to be live streaming and recording it, so
Hallelujah.
people will have that in real time for
Do you
Michael's
know?
presentation.
Do you know the time already, Santi?
We
I
don't know yet. We don't know yet. Once we know, we will announce and we will post the link for people to see.
Yeah, I feel we should do a watch party or something like that. I feel it's going to be super cool.
Yeah, we can totally do that. We can totally do that.
I do just want to say one thing, Santi, about Discord itself before we move on. I don't care when
Yeah.
I say it. I just wanted to let you know if you wanted to say anything else about your trip.
No, 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 no. I think we covered all.
Okay. All right. So I know there's been a lot of spicy conversation around the Discord the last few days specifically. That's gotten a little bit hotter than usual. We've been pretty lenient. We've been pretty lenient on the arguments and the name calling and all that stuff because we understand that a lot of people have passion, but we created a high risk zone channel and all arguments need to be going in there from now on. Now that we have the list of changes out here, we're going to have Chip and Chris out here as well talking with you guys. We're not going to be as lenient on this kind of stuff. So please, 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 no more name calling, no more arguments outside of the high risk zone chat. Make sure you guys are being respectful to one another. I just wanted to bring that up real quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Let me add something to that really quick, Dom. And I think that one of the key reasons why Stratless is successful, I am completely biased, but it's because of the community vibe that we have. And a lot of people really enjoy spending time in here. and there's a lot of passion in here as well. But you also have to think about the new players that are coming. It's a make or break for a project when you join the community and you see name calling in the chats and you see like just people insulting each other and stuff like that. And that's not what we ever had in the Stratos community. And that's probably not what made you guys out there be uh, a community member here right now and spend time with us. It's because we're very permissive in and we don't like to ban or anything like that, and we let the conversation happen. But you guys have to think about the new users as well. Like when someone new is joining, the experience of general chat, of members introduction channel, it's very important. Like we have to be helpful with those users. They need to see a good vibe in the community. So that's why we have specific channels where you guys can be as passionate as you want and have the discussions that you want to have without actually creating any damage for lurkers or new users that are just looking to join Star Atlas, because that's also very important. Once when you are here all day every day, like you get the vibe of the community, like you get used to being on the daily basis. But there are a lot of people that are just lurking around, let me tell you that. We met with people in Dubai, in Istanbul, in Bangkok, that follow every single thing, but they don't talk in the channels, for example. So yeah, it's important to keep a good vibe out there, keep it civil and respectful. And if you want to have a heavy debate, we create a channel specifically for you to do that. But let's make sure that the Stratus community vibe is not broken, that the Stratus community vibe is still there, because I feel like that's one of the key things that differentiates our project from others. And it's a responsibility that we have as a whole, as a community, to keep that clean. So yeah.
Absolutely, Stancy. And just to add to this point, everyone here is part of the Star Atlas mission. You, as a community member, you are participating in in the progress and development of Star Atlas. Meaning that as we as a company decided to do an open development, we invited you guys to be part of this, providing feedback, testing our game mechanics, testing our economy, and everything that we are doing here, no one has done before. No one has an in-game open market economy like us in the blockchain with the constraints and benefits that it has. And from day zero to this moment, this company was built upon mutual trust. The players trust that Automata is doing its best to work as fast as possible to develop the game of their vision, and we trust the community to give us feedback and support us in the best way that they can. When we break the borders of respect and people start coming after team members over some development phase that they are not happy with or some things that they think that could be better, that's totally fine. But I think that if you don't keep the respect, this will only make things move slower, or people get pissed, or you have problems in development, and people will start to disregard the feedback that you are giving because you might be toxic. This is a shared mission, guys. We are not, it's not a logic of us against you, you against others. No. The success of Star Atlas depends on everyone working together to make this happen. We don't want to antagonize you. We don't want to not do things because we simply are slacking or things like that. No. We move as fast as we can and we provide updates and interactions as fast as we can. And yes, we need time to assess things, we need time to evaluate things, because Star Atlas doesn't end in Starbased. Starbased is but a stepping stone towards the new gameplay modes, the new mechanics that we are developing. So I understand we want to get everything right at our first try. We want to be the best product ever and be as quick as we can, but that simply isn't possible as human beings. And I understand when prices come down or the market is bad, those perceptions of things are not working are exacerbated. But we need to keep a level headed. We need to be level headed here, be together, and work together to make Star Atlas the best game it can. And yeah, that was basically what I wanted to say. Sorry if I took too long.
No. I think
Well said, bro. Well said,
yeah,
Penguin.
very well said, man. Very well said. And yeah, it's a vision that we're all building together. And at the end of the day, it's passion. Like
It's
people are
passion.
just insulting each other or being very vocal because they're passionate and because they want Stratless to succeed. And believe me, everybody on the team is on the same mission. And everybody that is in this Stratless team is giving their everything, literally everything, mental health, is spending less time with their children, is spending less time with their loved ones, just to see this vision succeed. And they're paying attention to every single thing that is happening in the community as well. So yeah, we're building this together. We'll get this done for sure. And yeah, we just ask for the community to be respectful with each other, with team members, and just yeah, we keep building, and we will achieve this Radless vision all together. So with that said, we just announced a couple big changes that are happening to the game design and econ side of things for Sage, and we know that it's a quote unquote big announcement or a bit difficult to understand. So that's why we brought today to the brew. We brought Chip and Chris. So if Chip and Chris can raise their hands, so we can let you guys on stage. We'll be covering all the details on what was announced, and yeah, just give some time also before we close for people to ask questions here as well. But with that said, Chris, welcome to the stage. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. Obviously, bit of an exciting morning, but we're all going to make through it. We've certainly persisted through far worse.
For
I
sure.
think a year ago we would be begging for what we have right now. So I'm really happy that we're here today and we're able to talk about the changes. We've been working on these changes for a while, and we have also been a bit more restrictive on how much we're interacting with the community, in particular because of certain sentiments maybe trending downwards. That can result in a little bit of a bumpier interaction for us. So we've been conservative. We've been trying to do our best to develop and produce the best possible update. And honestly, I'm really happy with where we've ended up. And obviously, the concerns expressed this morning are, they kind of lit a fire under us, and we said, okay, well, let's make this announcement. We were planning on, maybe taking another few days or something like that, but we're really happy with the results and excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, man, for sure. And yeah, these are some good updates. And again, like we'll get more on details shortly with you, Chris and Chip. And that leads me to Chip. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well, doing well. Yeah, I would echo everything Chris just said. I think the only thing I would add is from a game design perspective, I think everybody should find it or be aware that iteration is natural for any game. Like it's unheard of to just release something once and then never have to make any balance changes or any updates, particularly with a project this complex. So while we could say, well, we should spend more time in testing, you really don't get all the feedback you need until there's real stakes involved. So it's there's a balance to be made, and we're learning from this process with every single release. But there's a balance between spending more time in testing and try to iron these out, over a longer development period, or pushing things out sooner and then iterating them on them while they're public. So we'll continue to find that balance, but I would like to reassure everybody that this is normal, and we're constantly working hard to to observe, collect data, even though that's a meme now, and listen to feedback and not let the emotions get too much involved in our decision making, and try to make the best decisions long term. So I think that's all I'll say to get us going.
Yes, sir.
Well
Yes.
said, fellas.
Yep. Yep. This is a long-term vision, guys, and we iterate fast as well, very fast. It's it's unheard of to iterate also in like 3-4 weeks from release and just change the economy and all that. So yeah, I think we can move now to the main topic here, and just I think Chris will be beneficial for the community as well. If we can break down just a little bit more in detail the key points that we just announced.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll call on Chip here to handle some of the nuances for the actual gameplay updates. But you obviously can see the announcements in our announcements channel about the changes that are coming to the game and the game economy. Before I jump into each one of those points and kind of the motivation and the motivation behind it, as well as how we ended up coming about the ultimate decision, because each one of these requires significant amount of work on our part, right? We have to collect the data, we have to get the data, we have to analyze the data, and then we have to start to experiment with different potential solutions. So, we don't just throw a dart at a dartboard and say, maybe we'll do this. And we also don't just pick numbers out of thin air. They have to be calculated. So I'll go through and explain each one of those. Real quick, first, I did want to kind of point out two things that I think ultimately do have an impact on our entire little our little ecosystem here, which we talked about how positive the community is in Star Atlas and how it's just not like any other Web3 community out there, and that's true. And it is sad to see some unsteadiness and some potential falls in our positivity, but let's keep in mind that there's three major things that have happened in the last 3 months. Two of them are in our control and one of them is not. So the two that are in our control, we had a massive economic change and we had a massive gameplay change. When we updated from Sage Labs to Starbased, we ended up seeing Atlas emissions. I mean, we had an Atlas emission day of, I think, 20 million Atlas between Score, Sage Labs, before the release of Starbased. And then we cut that down to 4.5 million. Now, as much as we'd like to believe that our tokenomic distribution has 100% bearing on the price of token in the market, this isn't necessarily true. So we did see a massive decrease in the emission rate of Atlas, which we're obviously going to address that later. And we also saw from a gameplay perspective, all of a sudden there's now this competition between players for this scarce resource. Now, both of these things are desirable in the long term, and I think all people who have, if you've ever if you've ever experienced a game economy, a Web3 game economy fail, they usually didn't have low emissions and they usually didn't have scarce competition. So we try to introduce to those two things, which are definitely good for the long term of the game, but obviously challenging in the short term. So that's the first two things. The gameplay changes, the economy changes. Now you couple this with an unfortunate, relatively, expected sliding in the macro economy, which we're much more exposed to the macro economy than, maybe would be ideal for development. But that's the way it is. If crypto is down, we're down a little bit. So we also saw this pretty marked decrease in token prices across the entire crypto ecosystem. And this, coupled with the reduction in Atlas emissions, while in a perfect world, this would increase the reduction in emissions would increase the value of the token. Obviously, it didn't have that effect. So we've kind of seen this pretty big reduction in overall value. The good news is we have a lot of ways to address this. But I want us to keep in mind that a lot of no matter what we think, if you found out that you lost, some money or something like that, it would affect you negatively. Whenever I lose a chess game, I'm in a bad mood for the rest of the day. And it's not because of anything big. It's just because this one thing in the background has kind of impacted me. So let's keep in mind that there's a macroeconomic, shift that's happening right now. And who knows what it'll look like in the future, but it's going to impact our psyche no matter what, no matter how insulated and trained we think we are. Now, I also wanted to address the small player problem, so to speak, because it is a legitimate one and it's a legitimate concern. No matter what we do, no matter what you guys do, we are on a blockchain, and a blockchain has fixed costs associated with operating on it. So no matter whether you have a tiny fleet or a massive fleet or a small ship or a big ship, you're going to end up paying the same rent costs and the same transaction costs for that single fleet or single ship. Now, what happens if your fleet is only worth $5 versus a fleet that's worth $500? That fixed cost is flat across the fleets. So it disproportionately impacts people with smaller fleets or smaller ships relative to players with larger ships and larger fleets. And this is true for transaction fees as well, not just the account fees. So we've got this difficulty where players feel much more oppressed at the smaller player level because they're just impacted by these fixed costs much more than those larger players are. Now, the good news is most of the stuff in game, in fact, all of the stuff in game, is a variable cost. Actually, I think the only fixed cost in the game is the respawn fee, and that's trivially low in order to try and alleviate this concern. And eventually, it will be variable. So I just want to note that I hear your concerns. We're not brushing off any of these concerns as, oh, this isn't really a thing. You're crazy. I made a comment in the Foundation room about how we've seen in terms of Atlas emissions, we have seen our wealth inequality actually drop relative to Sage Labs. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. That wasn't to say that there's not a small player kind of suffering that's happening with the current macroeconomic and Solana blockchain environment that we're operating in. Okay, so those are just two things I wanted to get out of the way. Sorry for moaning on, but let's get into the list of announcement in order.
Yeah, I think we can quickly cover maybe Dom if you want to read it, like all the changes at once, and then Chris, we get on the granular with you.
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay, so if you guys haven't read the announcement yet, the change list is separated into two different categories. So the first category is changes that are probably going to be happening in the next 24 to 48 hours, maybe sooner, maybe a little bit after, just knowing us. And then the second category is changes coming in a few days to a couple of weeks. So we're going to go through the 24 to 48 hours one first, which is number one is an increase in the total daily Atlas emissions to 6 million Atlas. Now, this is from 4.5 million Atlas. The second change happening in the next 24 to 48 hours is an increase to the LP reward for scanning for SDUs to 1,100 from 450. And then one more change happening in the next 24 to 48 hours is Starbase upgrades will now persist in the future. Now, a big note here from the team is while they will persist now, we can and will still change the map in terms of size and number of Starbases as we see appropriate. So just making sure everyone understands that. Now getting into the changes that are going to happen in a few days to a couple of weeks. First change is Atlas emissions will now scale with Starbase upgrades within a faction. Each Starbase upgrade will increase faction daily Atlas emissions. And just so everyone knows when details are coming out, that's when we'll have more details when the change kind of is closer or goes live. We'll see. Next, coming in the next few days to couple weeks is changes to Upkeep. So when Upkeep levels of food are high, crafting speeds are faster, and Upkeep burn rates are faster as well. The last change coming in the next few days to couple weeks is adding a game resource export tax. So there will now be a fee to export goods from the game, which should make hopping factions more difficult. Like I said, more details closer to that release. But yeah, that is the full rundown of all the different changes. Great changes, guys. By the way, I want to give a huge shout out to Chris and Chip for seriously, they put a lot of hard work into this kind of stuff. But yeah, that's everything. If you guys want to go one by one now, we can kind of tackle these one by one. Great.
Thank you, Dominic Bain. And yeah, guys, so now we are going to go one by one with Chris, and Chris will add more context and explanations to them. And we can also, we will be looking in the amphitheater chat to see if there are any questions that we can ask you, Chris and Chip. So if you guys have any questions, tag me or Dom in the chat, and we will try to get them raised to Chris and Chip. So Chris, if you want to take it now and cover the specific points.
Yeah, sure. So I was talking about fixed costs earlier, and one way to kind of help. So basically, you can think of like a fixed cost as like a one tax. And what this does is if you have a one tax, you do end up with some people who are underwater. And even if they were to optimize everything, let's say that they're making, 10 Atlas a day or 5 Atlas a day, and all of a sudden, their costs are 5.5 Atlas. There's nothing really that anybody can do, especially if those costs are fixed, to get them above that. So one way to alleviate that is a blanket increase in Atlas emissions overall. So we ended up pulling back on Atlas emissions quite a bit going into Starbase, which we knew that it was going to be a pretty major change, and we were okay with that. We wanted to be more conservative, and so what this is basically, I mean, we've been toying with 6 million for quite a while. Divides nicely by 3, obviously, but also just kind of puts us back up into the mean Atlas emissions that we had seen during the Sage Labs score era. So we were at about 6 million Atlas emissions per day for I would say the 6 months prior to Starbase being released. So it's a number that we were kind of gelling with for a while, and it's something that we think is the economy is more than ready for. So the number relatively arbitrarily chosen based on previous data, as well as obviously staying within the original white paper tokenomics distribution. So I think like at this point we had in that paper somewhere around 8 million Atlas emitted per day, between 8 and 9 million Atlas per day, which ultimately that was a very different environment. That was the score environment, and that was based off of like selling out of all ships. So we're still well within our Atlas emissions curve, which we're comfortable with. So this 6 million also gives us some wiggle room when it comes to other upgrades that we're planning to release. So that's the Atlas emissions logic there. Nothing too crazy in terms of the analysis, but it does help to bring everybody up a peg, basically. So it's going to bring those people that are potentially underwater above water, which is a highly desirable thing. Because it's uniform, it should not disproportionately impact anybody one way or the other. Obviously, it'll feel much better for a smaller player than for a larger player, because it's going to bring them into that profitable zone. Number 2 here, increase the LP reward for scanning. This is something that was actually on the back burner for a while. We knew that 450 was just kind of a shot. We had some estimates of what it should be, and 450 was the original number that we came up with. It was really, really difficult to know how the SDU market was going to settle down once we released the new mechanics. Obviously, there was a massive change to SDUs, as everybody knows. So 450 was kind of a conservative estimate. Again, this 1100 number is something that we're pretty confident about, and it's based on both the data where we can see that there's an underrepresentation of SDUs being submitted to upgrading for LP compared to other assets. So we believe that this increase in over 100% is going to drive that SDU contribution up and hopefully help those smaller players, since SDU farming is a much more attainable or a much more practical gameplay loop for smaller players to interact with. So that number was both analytically found through the data, but also kind of theoretically found through game design. So that was a nice work together with game design and econ to find a right number. So hopefully that one will get us closer to what the ideal number is. Starbase upgrades will now persist into the future. Not a whole lot to say about this one. This was something that we needed to confirm from a technical perspective on whether or not this was something that was possible. And we basically said, well, if we can adjust the map into the future, maybe, the map is currently too small for 1 million players, right? We need a bigger map if we're going to have more players. So the idea is the map might change, but these starbases that you guys are building will persist. Now, that said, once combat comes online, these starbases are going to be able to be blown up. Now, we'll probably see a rebalancing in terms of how difficult it is to upgrade starbases once combat comes out, because right now we have no combat. So starbase upgrading is more challenging, and its main purpose is to provide an LP to players. So that is going to be very exciting to see how that plays out once we have combat online. So some other changes that are perhaps a little bit further out, but these other the ones in the first 24 to 48 hours are basically things that we just flip a switch and then the game is updated. The other ones are going to be mechanical changes that are going to actually require code to be changed. So we're giving ourselves a little bit more time. Now, mind you, we've been working on this with the engineering team for the last 3 weeks. So a lot of this is already ready to go. We're just now, it's about implementing it and making the program changes. Okay. So changes coming in the next few days. Atlas missions are now going to scale with Starbase upgrades within a faction. So I'm very excited about this one. This was something that I think game design was throwing this idea around, and it just really stuck as something that feels good. It really lines up with the goal and mission of faction, contribution, as well as the whole entire LP system. So what this is going to mean is that for each number of star bases of a particular tier, you get an additional Atlas bonus. Now, the bonus for tier 1 star bases is 0, but the bonus for tier 2s is going to be a bigger number. And then for tier 3s is going to be more than twice as much as tier 1. So what this does, or sorry, tier 2. So what this does is it encourages you not just to upgrade star bases, but to go deep in upgrading the star bases. So a starbase tier 5 is going to be more valuable than 4 starbase tier 1s in terms of the Atlas, additional Atlas. Now, the way that this is going to work, somebody says love exponential. I wouldn't call it exponential, but it will be more valuable to have a tier 5 starbase over a tier, over 4, oh, let me think. Over 4 tier 2 starbases, because there are four upgrades. Okay. The cool thing about this, there's a bunch of really cool stuff that comes from this. The first one is faction conflict. Once we get combat online, now there's a natural mechanic already, and we're going to have additional ones, but there's already a mechanic built into Atlas emissions such that if I go and dominate another starbase, or I am able to take over a starbase, I can expand my faction's Atlas emissions. So it's kind of trying to get back into that competition between factions. So this is a kind of really nice added benefit of having starbases contribute to the Atlas emissions. Now, what's the overall impact of these upgrades going to be? The goal is to have the overall impact. So if you look at the Atlas emissions for a faction that has 0 upgraded to fully upgraded, we're hoping to get that in the 25 to 35% bonus range. So let's say that there's 2 million Atlas emitted per day for your faction. If you were all the way upgraded, you can make that, probably it's going to end up being maybe it's somewhere in the 2.5 to 2.75 range or something like that. Numbers have not been completely finalized for that, and even the ones, well, they have been, but I'm not comfortable sharing them. So pretty happy about that. What that will do is it'll still bring us under that token emissions curve. We're still going to be well within our comfort zone in terms of token emissions, but it will also add this sense of actual, why am I upgrading these star bases? Well, you're upgrading them so that in the future you have more powerful base and you can blah, 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 blow up your opponents. But it really gives something right now visceral that the players can feel and say, oh, okay, cool. We've got our 2 million base, but we also get our bonus from our upgraded star bases. So that is Starbase upgrading. Chip, if you got anything to say, I've been kind of mumbling for a while. I don't know if you have anything.
You covered it. It's pretty exciting to feel like your decisions and your teamwork right now will have an impact. The other cool thing that we've been toying with is, well, with Starbase destruction, you could lose some Atlas. What if you're incentivized to defend your Starbase against Jorvix or even PVEs? We're thinking about that as well. So it just, all in all, this mechanic sets us up for some more interesting gameplay and consequences when combat comes out.
Yeah, honestly, probably makes sense for you to cover the upkeep mechanic, I think, because that was kind of a clever solution that you and Brett had worked on together.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just read it one more time and then explain kind of the rationale behind it. So changes to upkeep: when upkeep levels are high, crafting speeds are faster, and upkeep burn rates are faster. When upkeep levels are low, so low amounts in the upkeep coffer, crafting speeds are slower, and upkeep burn rates are slower. So what this means is, why do we need to make changes to upkeep? The reason is because there's a disproportional access to opportunity. A small player can't realistically go to a remote starbase that's not being upkept by a more, a larger player, because upkeep costs are so high, right? And then vice versa, a larger player can upkeep a starbase, but then disproportionately, like, just take advantage of that, the window of opportunity there more so than, say, the smaller players. So the changing the upkeep so that a smaller player can actively go to a remote starbase and craft, and is, even if the starbase is empty, will just increase the options they have. But also, something embedded in this relationship is that when starbases are like um, when starbases are low on their upkeep, the burn rates are slower. So that means smaller players can actually put in enough, or we're trying to balance so that they can put in um, enough food in particular, so that it lasts long enough for them to actually, um, I guess, take advantage of the upkept state. So that's basically it. One of the biggest changes here is just going from completely zeroed out crafting rates when a star race is not upkept, to now it's just going to be a low rate. Um, I think that's really important. I think we realized it was way too penalizing to completely stop all crafting when upkeep wasn't in an upkept state. So I think that's all I can say there on the upkeep changes. And I guess, another thing here is, this is specific to crafting. We're going to leave. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, but we're going to leave the toolkits upgrading alone, or as is, and just observe what happens with food first before we decide to make any changes to the toolkit side, right?
Yeah, that's right. So obviously a ton of changes coming in, and if there's anything we can keep stable, we're gonna try to keep it stable. The big reason behind food is, like, if you cut off crafting ability, if you're a new player and you come in and you're trying to craft something and you can't figure out why you're not crafting it, I mean, that's a much bigger deal than if they can't contribute something to a starbase, or if the starbase isn't upgrading. So it's definitely possible that we're going to see some additional changes to toolkits. In fact, I'd be very surprised if we didn't see any changes to toolkits. But definitely the food is a more high priority when it comes to the individual player's experience.
While you were talking, that reminded me, on the other side of the spectrum, say, actually filling up the upkeep coffers to near full, while the burn rates are increased, you might even see higher crafting rates than, depending on how we finalize the curves, but higher crafting rates that are possible right now, right? That way, there is incentive to drop in a lot of food and get it hot, fill up the coffer, because imagine, and this is just theoretical, imagine you're getting a 20% buff to your crafting rate for doing so. So that's something we're playing with, and we're still working on the curves right now that define these rates, but that's kind of the system we're going for.
Man, this is
Yep.
super cool. Like, I mean, if you can get a buff, if you keep it like nearly top it, yeah, I foresee this as a huge incentive to pump crafting, especially when we are in war situations and player needs to provide toolkits and fuel in the space station. Yeah, this is super cool, guys.
Sweet. Let's since even though it feels like this has been 2 seconds, we're already at 45 minutes. So let's hop into this final change, which was honestly kind of a last minute add by us even. So and it's quite underbaked at this stage. There's quite a lot of kinks that need to be worked out, but we felt that this is something that we definitely have been thinking about and we're working on. So we just decided to throw it into this update because we know it's something that people are concerned about. So obviously, we're aware that players can multi-faction in order to optimize their yield, right? Like, no matter what we do, because each faction gets their own Atlas pool, players are able to, if they want to, go and be a part of multiple factions with different wallets and different fleets, etc. The whole point of this mechanic is to balance out the factions so that we don't have one faction that's clearly dominant over another. So it's a natural balancing mechanic. It's very much a forward-thinking, long-term strategy. But obviously, there's some issues that arise in the short term and when there's very little cost associated with multi-factioning. So this is really a problem for player sentiment and sniping, right? So if somebody wants to split their resources equally across 3 different factions, so be it. That's fine. We're not super, upset about that. What we want to avoid is this almost griefing type of behavior where, players feel really good. They see the LP in their pool. They see what their estimated Atlas, and then all of a sudden that just goes away within the, last 5 minutes of the epoch. So that's not a desirable impact. There are a bunch of different ways to address this, and we're certainly entertaining all of them. But the one that we really like, and then this one hopefully will be the simplest fix, the lowest kind of lift fix, is an export tax on resources in game. So this is Starbase upgrading materials, R4, raw resources, these types of things. So when you go to bring them out of a Starbase and into your wallet, there's going to be a tax. Now, there's a whole bunch of additional mechanics we're considering. Maybe it's a timer, and you can pay to bypass the timer by paying the tax, or maybe there's a timer on ships, or there's a whole bunch of different things that we could do. Importantly, we do not want to upset the current gameplay loop of building something in game, bringing it out of game and selling it on the marketplace. That's something that smaller players do a lot because they don't have necessarily the operation to do LP. So they'll want to go and they'll be a part of some sort of smaller gameplay loop. Like, I'm going to go craft, power sources, and then I'm going to sell them onto the marketplace. That person's going to end up getting screwed if we just have this blanket export tax. So we have a bunch of different things that we're thinking about in order to alleviate that concern. And one of them is, and at this stage, we're sort of theory crafting here. There's a lot that still needs to be built in here, but one of those is local marketplaces. We think that that'll alleviate that problem. If I can take it to a different Starbase and sell it, or I can sell it at the CSS, I don't need to take it out of the game, and I don't need to experience that export tax. So the goal is really to impact those particular players who are trying to do something that's less than great or fun for the rest of the community. Excited about that change. Lots and lots to chat about, but it's probably the least drilled down of all these changes right now.
Cool. Yeah, I think we covered everything that was in the announcement, but I'm sure there are some questions out there. So I don't know, Chris, if you and Chip, if you guys feel like answering some if they come in.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, let's see in the chat, guys. If you have any questions, please tag me or Tom, and we'll try to ask them, or maybe raise your hand as well. We can let you in on stage. Alexis is saying, so people can send, for example, biomass at the CSS to someone else tax-free. I think they're talking about the local stuff.
Where is that?
I think that's on the last thing that you mentioned, the theory crafting side of things.
Where's the comment? I'm just struggling to find it.
Oh, it's in the Atlas Amphitheater.
Okay.
Let me tag you on it.
Okay, that would be good because there's a lot of comments coming in.
Yeah.
So people can send from, for example, biomass at the CSS to someone else tax-free. Might need more clarification on this one.
Don't worry, we can move to the next one. There's a good question here from Brian. If you can talk a little bit about the data gathering efforts and what that actually means, whatever you can touch on. No need to be super.
Yeah. So basically, we're very unique we're very different from a traditional firm in that most of our data comes from on-chain data. Like most of the data we get doesn't come from us reading a client and reporting that with some sort of data processor I'm blanking on all the names, but we get our data from an on-chain data provider called Hello Moon. So they are capturing all of the messages and account data that comes from the Solana blockchain, and they're transferring that to us in a relatively cleaned up format. So before it gets to them, it's completely deserialized and it's basically ones and zeros. So once it gets to them, they use our programs, or they work with our engineers in order to deserialize that data. Now, some of you guys are data analysts in blockchain, so this all makes sense to you, but some people aren't. So they transform that data, they put it into a nice little database for us that we have access to, and we stream our own data, our own data from there. So we stream that into our own data environment, and we're able to create new views and stuff like this. Now, when the data gets to us, it's not in the most usable format. I actually wrote a blog post about this a couple of weeks ago. But what happens in blockchain data is when a transaction goes through, there's typically a slew of instructions that go through it. So for example, let's say you are depositing an Upkeep resource. If you deposit an Upkeep resource, a bunch of instructions go through. The first one is going to be the, I might be butchering the instructions, but deposit Upkeep ingredient. The other one is going to be increment points, and there's actually going to be a bunch of increment points that are going to go through in some of these transactions. Increment points could increase your XP for license. It could increase your council rank XP. It could also increase your LP in some cases. Okay, so what you end up with is this pretty messy situation where you have a list of all of the instructions every time an LP was, or a Starbase Upkeep material was deposited, but you don't know how much LP was rewarded. You don't know necessarily, in some cases, even how much of that asset was reported. So you need to do a complicated procedure of combining a ton of different resources together in order to get a clear picture. Even after you've got that clear picture, all of the naming conventions on blockchain are X's, Z's, and Y's and zeros. It's X5, 52, 45, 6. And you have to create a mapping that understands all the different combinatorics of those different recipes. It could be a recipe, it could be an upgrading thing, it could be, it could be the name of a resource. All these different things need to be labeled. So once you've got this clean, beautiful data set, you can finally start on the actual process of evaluating what it is you want to do. So that's the process of just getting the data. Now, obviously, we released Starbase and we had none of this. We had to start from scratch. So it was me, Gareth, an incredible data engineer, Daniel DeVette, working pretty much around the clock to try and get this data available. So there were some problems we literally couldn't answer. There were some questions we literally couldn't answer until many days after we had been working with the data. And then once we get the data, then we go and we write 1,000 lines of Python code or R code in order to evaluate the data and the scenario that we're trying to understand. So for example, today for the SDU changes, fortunately, we've got a nice data set that we've already built that allowed me to pretty quickly grab how much SDUs is each player depositing at every single second or in each moment, and how much LP are they getting, et cetera, et cetera. And I was able to evaluate the kind of underperformance of SDUs and say, yep, we are underperforming in SDUs. This is the type of increase that we should see. And here's the predicted behavioral outcome. And that's where the the economic modeling comes in, because you have to make assumptions about human behavior. So that's where we get these numbers from. It's a very, very long process from start to finish. And we had, I don't know, I don't think Starbase has been out for more than a month, has it? Somebody can correct me, but we've had about 4 weeks or so. Maybe it's been longer than that. The time has absolutely escaped me. But the 2nd of April. Okay, so 1 month and 6 days. We've had 1 month and 6 days to do this for every single instruction and action in the game. Okay, so you think about each of these points on here. Each one required a pretty in-depth analysis as well as getting the data itself. So obviously now we've got our great data. Like we don't, these types of analyses are just, it's about doing the analysis. And sometimes analysis can take longer than others, depending on the type of how sophisticated the exercise you're doing is. But that's a little bit of a day in the life. Some of you guys are very familiar with that. The way we get our data for you Flipside and Dune users, the way we get our data is pretty different than Flipside and Dune. And sometimes we do supplement our analyses with data from Dune or Flipside by running a quick query on those websites, try and grab, hey, I want to get all the holders of this token. That's just going to be quicker and easier to do in Flipside initially than it is going to be doing in our own environment. Now we have the ability to do that in our environment, but yeah, it's all quite cumbersome at first.
Yeah, I think this context is actually super helpful for all the people out there. So I appreciate you covering it, Chris.
Absolutely.
There are more questions coming. There's one from Jaywalk saying, why not just have a faction swap cooldown timer? If you pull ships out of a faction, you need to wait 5 days before putting them into a different faction. Seems like a much easier and better solution. Any thoughts on that one? Maybe Chip as well on this one?
On the topic of like timers and taxes between factions, and we're still actively discussing this internally, but I think one of the initial conclusions we came to is that taxing things prior to local markets doesn't make sense, right? Especially because that would impact the smaller players that are trying to get resources out and potentially list those on the marketplace. That would further, inhibit their margins, right? So we're toying with the idea of a delay, and potentially that delay is only applied to resources and not ships. We still have to discuss and figure out all the implications of all this. But that would mean that while you can say in Starbase, you can take all your ships out and move them over to the other faction, you can't necessarily bring all of the resources and products you crafted in the other faction to the new faction instantaneously. That there would be a timing delay there, right? And then once we turn on local markets, we can turn that delay into a tax. So small players can still sell easily to other players in their faction at the local star base or even cross faction. Well, but at the local star bases. But then if you want to export completely from one CSS to another, there'd be a tax involved there. So just some more clarity on the current thoughts behind that. We're not trying to do death by 1,000 cuts and like tax everything. What we're trying to do is find an elegant solution to mitigate the issue of opportunistic sniping and between factions, right? And it also makes sense from a lore perspective. You shouldn't be able to just instantly transport things between CSSs. While they're in lore, there's jump points between them. There should still be some sort of like like
Yeah,
I
the
guess
star path allows you to
yeah.
go from
There's
the one faction to the
there's a governing rate limiter there on things that can go between those jump points, whether it's taxed or whether it's timed, right? So we're exploring that right now, and we think it'll help with the star based issues as well.
There's a follow-up from Jaywalk to the question saying, wouldn't eliminating ship movements reduce sniping more so than resource tax?
Eliminating ship movement reduce. Oh, that's a question for Chip.
Yeah.
Would eliminating ship movement reduce sniping more than so if somebody sees an opportunity in another faction and they move all their ships over, they still need to mine, they still need a craft, and they still need to upgrade, right? So that doesn't happen instantaneously unless they've already stockpiled resources. Then they're entitled to being able to apply those resources however they want at the star bases. But what they can't anticipate is ahead of time is like, oh, this opportunity just emerged in the last 12 hours. I'm going to go capitalize on that. Even if you can move all your ships over, you can't necessarily move mountains quickly, right? Especially at the higher at the higher levels of activity we're primarily discussing here. So I don't while we're still discussing, I think just limiting the resources would be sufficient.
Well, I think that answers the question. There's one question from Alexis. I think clarification on what we asked first. He's asking, I would like to know if my friend from Worcester will still be able to send me biomass. I craft the food and then send it back, or will this delay be put on those kinds of transactions too?
So if this is like OTC, if it's OTC where like the user creates biomass in their game and then brings it into their wallet, sends it over to their friend brings it into their game in a different faction and crafts crafts food from it in the environment where the export tax is required and there's local markets, which like I kind of like that. It also from my own personal point of view, it also helps to prevent some of the OTC trading. It not that that's inherently bad, but ultimately we do want players to. We're hoping to eventually have a marketplace that's good and enjoyable, and people want to trade in game. But all that to say, yeah, you would technically, if you're going to pull it out of the game and send it to another player, and they're going to bring it into the game, there would be in that paradigm there would be a tax. Now, if we end up doing a freeze or something like that, maybe it goes into escrow for 3 days or 24 hours or 48 hours. In which case, yeah, there wouldn't be. Kind of depends.
Cool. We're running out of time here. I know we have 2 codes, Jose, that we have to share with the audience.
Yep, let me get those for us here. So
There's a
guys,
silly code and a game 7, right?
absolutely. You have the Neverland code, which is Tufa, and the Gaming 7 code, which is Moda. I'll share those in the amphitheater chat right now.
Cool.
I'll-
Cool. So yeah, guys, we're running out of time here, and I want to be respectful of Chris and Chipto's time. So we can maybe follow this up next week or something like that, on another brew, and go over some questions, and we see how things play out here. But again, like really appreciate you, Chris and Chip, for taking the time to come here and address the concerns and just get more granular on the updates that we're about to push. So appreciate you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You guys are legends. Really good changes, by the way.
We love you guys.
Yep. So yeah, thanks everyone in the audience also for joining, and we'll post the recording as well on the announcements channel, so everyone who couldn't join can check it out and learn more about the updates. So yeah, thank you again everyone for joining, and also know that we know that it was a little bit of short notice that Chris and Chip were joining, but we felt like it was needed to get the guys here and just cover all that we just announced. So again, Chris and Chip, I appreciate you guys. I know that you also really wanted to come and clarify all this. So I appreciate you guys again. Shout out to you. And thanks everyone for joining. This was the Atlas Brew number 110. And yeah, we'll see you next Wednesday, same time as always. Ciao.
And be respectful to people while we're timing out and banning. I love you guys, though.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you guys.
Like.
You scoundrels. Just kidding. Love you guys. Bye.